All right. Who needs a script? Scripts make me procrastinate. Ooh, this isn't an easy one, not gonna lie. It's a thing, that's for sure. So, well, where do I start? Well, I guess I'm gonna start with where this was gonna start, right? Originally, I had this whole thing planned out, even started scripting it the first time. Something that was entirely focused on sort of trans rights and, yeah, everything that I felt in that sort of field. I had it all scripted out initially. I thought I was going to do something that would maybe help people who were maybe tripped over the entrance to the alt-right rabbit hole, and then had some way to get back up like I did when I tripped. And, I had my autism to help me get back up. And I think through that, I could provide something to other people who maybe didn't have that to help them out. But that wasn't how it worked out in the end. It was supposed to be like that. And I started writing, I had this whole thing about how I just planned it out, and it was going to start with, the one joke, which I think to a lot of people is sort of where you get drawn in, like I did. And then, moving up into how that impacts a lot of the stuff that people will spout, that kind of vitriol, with relation to stuff like turfism, right? Sort of underpins all of it as a sort of entry type thing. And then, through that, as you move up or down, I guess technically, it ends up with, turfism, just general transphobia, alt-right beliefs. It's just a nice thing that will pull you in, and, it's not unlikely that you'll end up siding with those people. Like, if sort of, quote, feminists, unquote, will sit on panels with far-right groups just to stop trans people from existing as themselves, it's not a far leap to think that just by sort of engaging with these ideas, it's something you might end up doing. So it's nice to sort of maybe provide that perspective, to maybe some people like me who may not be trans, but are just some cis white guys. Giving them some perspective might be a nice thing to sort of start off. And, I was going to end with, I'm barely even scratching the surface, but, it's not really my thing to talk about. Here are the people who inspired me to talk about this, and, yeah, move on from there. And, yeah, initially I had a section about why I wanted to do it. And initially, it started off as some long, convoluted thing where I started talking about how different things had opened my eyes to sort of creators in minority communities, for example, Bungie. And it was a long thing, and it was very convoluted, and I just ended up thinking that this was so long and just about me, I might as well refine it, right? So I did. And I cut it down a bit, and I took out, a lot of the stuff I was spouting. It hurt me as a leftist to be praising a company, no matter how good I thought they were. I just cut out a lot of the fat. And, well, what I landed on was something a bit shorter. And I think it was more personal. And it was basically this. How, I'd started watching a lot of minority creators, especially trans people, and One of the first ones I watched was Philosophy Tube, and eventually I watched Abigail Thorne's coming out videos, like coming out a trans story, or something along those lines. And then with that was sort of coming out official statement type thing, in which Abigail says this.
Well-meaning folks, like yourself, sometimes worry about embarrassing themselves by saying the wrong thing. So they don't speak up to help us.
And that made me want to do something. So from there I went on to say, that I'd kind of found some relatability, right? Because, I wasn't diagnosed with my autism until I was 21. So I spent those previous years living basically in sort of stuck state almost. I lived and I struggled with socializing and, forming friendships and relationships of any kind. And I didn't know why I couldn't, There was no explanation, and the only one I could come up with was that I was wrong, I was broken, I just couldn't do it right, And that was just the thing I took. And then obviously I got diagnosed, and everything made some more sense at the end of it. Now, the way I saw that after some introspection was that, honestly, the way it kind of felt was that I had spent my life up to that point trying to be one way, and I was attempting to do things that I wanted to do and be the person I wanted to be. But I couldn't do it. It was like my brain was fighting against me. And in listening to those sorts of statements, I was sort of moved by it in a way. I found connection. And I don't know, to me, it was someone talking to me, or some people, I guess, talking to me in a way that I didn't really get from any other help I'd looked for. Like, I'd been to some support groups with autistic people who were in similar sort of high functioning areas like me. But, the thing about autism is that it's different for every person. So it was obviously finding similarities there was all right, but it was only in sort of things we'd experienced in terms of speaking to me. It was all very, very far out and not what I'd felt at all, the way other people described it, apart from like passing resemblances to different points and a couple things here and there. So here I am, looking at something completely different, almost. And then I found a sort of connection with something almost completely different. Well, not quite, as I said, but it was a different problem. But it provided a sort of connection that I'd never felt with any other issue. So of course I just wanted to express in some way some sort of support or sympathy for people who had gone through the same sorts of feelings that I had had. That was sort of version 2, and so I slotted that into my script and kept moving forward. But as I moved through it and got towards a sort of transitioning towards an ending, I couldn't land it because it still felt like I was missing something. And honestly, it took me a while and a lot of thinking to land on what it really was, or at least what I think it was. And it wasn't until I watched this other video by a different creator called Jesse Gender, which, as a creator, obviously while browsing, sort of algorithm stuff thrown up at me, was like sort of algorithm had peered into my head and constructed the perfect sort of creator to fit what I was browsing for. Because obviously at the time I was listening to a lot of trans creators, and so it's like, all right, so we need to find a trans creator, right? But like, to make this like some sort of match perfect fit, right, we're gonna find someone who likes to put Star Trek in their things. And it's like someone reached into my head and took that out and came up with this creator, which obviously it's not by design, it was just coincidence. It's just like, it's not fair, you know. You found a weakness. You can't just put Star Trek noises just throughout your videos and expect me not to completely go nuts. It's like a weakness, right? Something I haven't seen anywhere else, really. And maybe that's on my end for not seeing anything else, but, you know. So obviously I was just like straight sucked in, because it was just like, yes, I need to see more Star Trek related or Star Trek spins, or just hear someone with a passion talk about that. And then I also had a video about his autism movie, which is obviously not something I can relate to at all, because I mean, apparently it was unrelatable, but it was called Music, and the person is called Music, right? And they're obviously a sort of much more severely autistic, or at least the idea was that they were, than I am. And tangent over. Basically, I was watching a video, I believe it was about Esri Dax on DS9. And so I was just watching it, and it was about sort of finding a new identity, right? And I think the focus was on about how Esri was, I say, new and struggling to find herself, how she fit in with the sort of Trill symbiont, and how it played a lot of parallels to how trans people try and find trans people try and find their own self in their transition, right? Like, obviously they have this feeling about where they know they want to be, but even so, it's a transition, right? And so finding where that ends is something that you've got to work through, or at least that's what I took from it. Anyway, in that, I think is kind of the sort of epiphany I guess I had, because it was, I don't know, I think it was just a sort of realization I came to. Like, obviously, you heard what I said before about, you know, not being diagnosed till 21. And then it formed a sort of identity around myself that I had, right? I came up with this image of what I was, of how I wasn't good at these things and all that. And while it wasn't a healthy identity, it was the one I had and the one I made for myself. And so I sort of had this image of myself that when I was diagnosed was completely removed. It wasn't my fault anymore. It was, there was a reason for everything. And well, that's where this comes in, because obviously then I didn't really have any other identity, and suddenly I had nothing at all, right? And so with the thinking about it that I just applied and listening to obviously what I was hearing, sort of kind of maybe clicked for me that I was listening to all these creators, not just because obviously the topics were interesting and I felt were important to either society or just were interesting in terms of philosophy based stuff or anthropological based stuff, which is just stuff that I genuinely am curious about and enjoy listening to and thinking about. But it was also because when hearing their stories, it was about finding an identity, I guess. And that was something that is something that I don't know. Maybe I thought if I listened to them, I'd be able to find my own sense of self. Or maybe it was cathartic almost. It was helpful just to listen to people who had been able to find something. It was like a feel-good thing, right? Either way, it's not like this revelation is entirely over, as it were. I just felt like I should commit it to some form because I had wanted to speak about it, and I still do. And I want to show support for these people because to me, they've provided something that I really am grateful for. And I just am, I'm just wanting to give back. I mean, obviously, I care about people as just a baseline. That's who I am. But I am just so much more connected to this issue. The way I feel about it is so much more personal, and that this issue especially was something I just wanted to talk about. And so even without knowing why, I started off doing it, and through it, I guess I kind of found out why it meant so much and why I wanted to just speak out, because it felt like something, I guess, that I related to, and so I could empathize with so much more easily. And I just wanted to sort of give back what I had been given. And by no means am I anywhere near done with my own introspection or journey, because the only thing I've really learned is that I know nothing. Reference to something that died so badly right there. It's just that my self-image, or more accurately, my sense of being able to self-reflect, was what was so shattered, which is why I'm still not sure I'm right here, but this feels about as right as anything else has ever. So I'm rolling with it and putting it down in not quite writing, because that for sure led to so much procrastination, but just in some form that hopefully I can work through. And yeah, as far as I know, that's why I feel this way. But hey, who knows? Maybe the next thing you'll see is my coming out video. You never know. Or more importantly, I don't, because whatever mirror I use for self-reflection is so obviously smashed into pieces. But yeah, that's all I had to say. And obviously, look at the people I've commented about. They're not the only ones that I've listened to, but they can obviously lead you on to many more creators like them. And maybe one day I'll put together my own thoughts. But I obviously also just, I guess in my own way, want to say thank you to them and everyone like them that I've been listening to and been able to take some kind of comfort and help from. And yeah, that's about all. I guess I'd also add that I support you and will always stand up for you and anyone like you. But hey, it's just something I had to say. I guess it kind of feels good to say it in the end. I guess I better step out now, back through the veil. Have a good one.